Did you know that 75% of Americans can't name more than 3 traditional Christmas desserts from the 1950s? It's true, and it's a sign of how much our holiday tastes have changed. In this video, we're bringing back 12 forgotten festive sweets that used to be the talk of every Christmas party. From sugar-coated curiosities to boozy British imports, these desserts tell a story of changing American culture. Ready to rediscover some lost holiday magic? Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Number 12. Sugar plums. Ever heard of sugar plums dancing in your head? Well, get ready for a sweet surprise. These festive treats aren't plums at all. Back in the 1800s, sugar plums were actually hard candies made by coating seeds or nuts in layers of sugar. It was a time-consuming process that could take days, with confectioners painstakingly building up each sugary layer. These treats became a big deal in the 19th century, even earning a starring role in The Night Before Christmas. People loved their small, round shape and the way they melted in your mouth. But why don't we see them anymore? Well, as candy making got easier and faster, these labor-intensive sweets fell out of favor. Plus, our taste buds changed and we started craving different flavors. Speaking of misunderstood treats, there's another Christmas classic that's not quite what it seems. Ever wonder why we sing about figgy pudding but never actually eat it? Number 11. Figgy pudding. Now bring us some figgy pudding. We've all belted out these lyrics during the holidays, but when was the last time you actually saw figgy pudding at a Christmas dinner? This mysterious dessert has been immortalized in song. Yet, it's strangely absent from our festive tables. So what's the deal with figgy pudding? And why has it vanished from our Yuletide feasts? Believe it or not, figgy pudding dates back to medieval England. It started as a savory dish made with beef and mutton, but over time, it evolved into a sweet, cake-like dessert. When it made its way to America, it became a Christmas staple. But here's the kicker, it doesn't even contain figs. The figgy part comes from the dried fruits used, like raisins and currants. Making figgy pudding was no joke. It took hours of mixing, steaming, and aging, sometimes for months. The result? A dense, moist cake packed with fruit and spices, often doused in brandy and set aflame for a dramatic presentation. Talk about a showstopper. So why did this pudding lose its Christmas magic? Well, as our lives got busier and convenience foods took over, spending days on a single dessert just didn't cut it anymore. Plus, tastes changed. Many found figgy pudding too heavy and rich for modern palates. Speaking of British imports that fell out of favor, there's another Christmas treat that underwent a major transformation. Ever heard of mince pies? You might be surprised to learn what they used to contain. Number 10. Mince pies. Traditional recipe. Mince pies were once a Christmas must-have, but they looked nothing like the sweet treats we know today. Back in medieval times, these pies were packed with minced meat, dried fruits, and spices. The meat wasn't just for flavor. It was a way to preserve food for the winter months. As the centuries rolled by, mince pies started to change. The meat content gradually decreased, while the sweet ingredients took center stage. By the 20th century, most mince pies were meatless, filled instead with a mix of dried fruits, spices, and sometimes brandy. These little pies weren't just tasty, they were loaded with symbolism. Their oval shape was said to represent Jesus' manger, while the top crust symbolized the swaddling clothes. Some even believed eating a mince pie each day from Christmas to Twelfth Night would bring good luck for the coming year. So why did mince pies lose their meaty filling? As refrigeration became common and tastes shifted towards sweeter treats, the traditional meat-filled version fell out of favor. Today, while you can still find mince pies during the holidays, they're not nearly as popular as they once were. Number 9. Ribbon candy. Ribbon candy first appeared in America in the mid-1800s, brought over by German immigrants. Its unique shape was created by skilled candy makers who would stretch, fold, and twist hot sugar syrup into delicate, rippling strands. The process was as much an art as it was a science, requiring precise timing and expert hand movements to achieve those perfect, paper-thin ribbons. By the early 20th century, ribbon candy had become a Christmas staple. Its vibrant colors and intricate design made it as much a decoration as a sweet treat. But why don't we see it much anymore? Well, it turns out that beauty comes at a price. Ribbon candy is incredibly fragile, often arriving at stores already broken. As mass-produced, more durable candies flooded the market, our delicate ribbons of sugar started to lose their appeal. Number 8. Gingerbread houses, elaborate Victorian style. Gingerbread houses have roots in 16th century Germany. Inspired by the fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel, they made their way to America with German immigrants, becoming a Christmas staple by the early 1900s. Creating these edible masterpieces was no small feat. It required patience, skill, and a steady hand to construct and decorate these intricate buildings. But as our lives got busier, the time-consuming art of gingerbread housemaking started to crumble. Pre-made kits and store-bought houses became the norm, lacking the charm and creativity of homemade versions. Plus, with so many holiday activities competing for our attention, fewer families are setting aside time for this sweet architectural challenge. Number 7. Yule log cake, bûche de Noël. The Yule log cake, or bûche de Noël, wasn't always a sweet treat. It started as an actual log burned during winter solstice celebrations. Over time, this tradition transformed into an edible centerpiece. By the 19th century, French bakers were crafting these cakes to look like miniature logs, complete with bark-like textures and woodland decorations. Making a Yule log cake was no small feat. Bakers would carefully roll a thin sponge cake filled with cream, then cover it with chocolate frosting. They'd use special tools to create a bark-like texture and add meringue mushrooms, marzipan, holly, leaves, and a dusting of powdered sugar snow. So why has this showstopper become a no-show at many holiday gatherings? Well, it's pretty time-consuming to make, and our busy lives don't always leave room for intricate baking projects. Plus, tastes have shifted towards simpler, less rich desserts. Number 6. Plum pudding. Plum pudding's roots stretch back to medieval England, where it started as a savory porridge. Over time, it evolved into a sweet, dense cake packed with dried fruits, spices, and a healthy dose of brandy. Making one was no quick task. Families would prepare their puddings weeks or even months in advance, letting the flavors deepen over time. The real magic happened on Christmas Day. Just before serving, the pudding would be doused in warm brandy and set alight, creating a mesmerizing blue flame as it was carried to the table. But why did this fiery favorite fizzle out? Well, it's a pretty heavy dessert for modern tastes, and let's face it, not everyone has the time or patience for months of pudding prep anymore. Number 5. Fruitcake, traditional dense version. Believe it or not, fruitcake has been around since ancient Roman times. It made its way to America with European settlers, becoming a holiday staple by the 19th century. These dense cakes were packed with dried fruits, nuts, and often soaked in spirits. Families would make them months in advance, letting the flavors deepen over time. Some even saved a piece for good luck. But somewhere along the way, fruitcake lost its charm. Maybe it was the rise of mass-produced versions that gave it a bad rap. Or perhaps our tastes simply changed, moving away from such rich, heavy desserts. Whatever the reason, fruitcake went from cherished gift to dreaded doorstop faster than you can say, re-gifting. Number 4. Marzipan fruits. Marzipan, a paste made from ground almonds and sugar, has been around since the Middle Ages. But it was during the Victorian era that crafting intricate fruits from this pliable material became all the rage. Skilled confectioners would spend hours molding and painting marzipan to create lifelike apples, pears, and even exotic fruits. These sweet replicas weren't just treats, they were status symbols. wealthy families would showcase elaborate marzipan displays during Christmas gatherings, impressing guests with their beauty and craftsmanship. Creating these fruits was a true art form, requiring a steady hand, keen eye, and lots of patience. So why don't we see marzipan fruits adorning our holiday tables anymore? Well, as our lives got busier, spending hours on intricate decorations just didn't fit into most people's schedules. Plus, tastes changed. Many found marzipan too sweet, and easier to make treats took center stage. Number 3. Wassail has a long and merry history. It started as an Old English greeting, wassail meaning be well. But over time, it evolved into a festive drink and a lively tradition. Picture this: a steaming bowl of spiced cider or ale passed around from person to person at Christmas gatherings. It wasn't just about the drink, but the sense of community it created. The wassail itself was a warm, comforting brew. Typically, it contained ale or cider mixed with sugar, spices, and sometimes eggs or cream. Some recipes even called for roasted apples or bits of toast floating on top. Making wassail was an event in itself, with families gathering to prepare the special concoction. So why don't we see wassail bowls at modern Christmas parties? Well, as our social norms changed, the idea of sharing a communal bowl became less appealing. Plus, with the rise of other festive drinks like eggnog and mulled wine, wassail simply got lost in the holiday shuffle. Number 2. Trifle, old-fashioned layered version. Trifle, a quintessential English dessert, made its way to American holiday tables in the mid-20th century. This showstopper featured layers of sponge cake, fruit, custard, and whipped cream, often with a splash of sherry for good measure. Served in a clear glass bowl, it was as much a feast for the eyes as for the taste buds. Making a trifle was an event in itself. Families would gather to carefully assemble the layers, each adding their own special touch. The result, a dessert that could feed a crowd and impress even the pickiest relatives. Number 1. Chestnut tarts. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire might be a classic lyric, but when was the last time you actually ate chestnuts at Christmas? There's a forgotten dessert that used to be the star of holiday gatherings. Let's crack open the curious case of the disappearing chestnut tart. Once upon a time, chestnut tarts were as much a part of Christmas as Santa himself. These nutty delights graced holiday tables across America, their rich, sweet flavor a perfect end to festive feasts. But nowadays, you'd be hard-pressed to find one at your average Christmas dinner. Chestnuts have been part of winter celebrations for centuries. In Europe, they were often the only nut available during the cold months. When settlers came to America, they brought this tradition with them. Chestnut trees were so common in the early days that people joked a squirrel could travel from Maine to Georgia without touching the ground. Making a chestnut tart was quite the process. First, you had to roast and peel the chestnuts, no easy task. Then came the grinding, mixing with sugar and spices, and carefully baking in a delicate pastry shell. The result? A dessert with a unique, earthy sweetness that's hard to describe if you've never tried it.